Hello, this is Taylor Garcia for EDL 853, Special Education for Building Administrators, and this is the case study for the end of the course. So section 1 is to summarize the case and establish the facts. So far what has happened is Miguel Hernandez is a student who has sustained an injury during a high school football game. As a result of that injury, he is paralyzed from the waist down and is using a wheelchair to move from place to place. When returning to school, he is told that his schedule has changed due to some of the restrictions of the building, and his parents brought in an attorney to meet with and discuss some of the changes that were made to Miguel's schedule without their knowledge. The events occurred at the Dover Unified School District at Nottingham High School, which is the only high school to serve this community, and they serve about 3,200 students. And the injury that he sustained happened at a high school football stadium. Everyone that is involved so far in the situation is Miguel Hernandez, who is the student. Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez are his parents. Ms. Gussman is the high school counselor that they meet with before Miguel returns to school. Unnamed, which would be myself in this case study as the building principal. Dr. Harvey Karp is the student, the superintendent of the district, and then Howard Carey is the attorney that attends the meeting at the end of the case study with Miguel's parents. Section 2 is to report any legal or ethical issues. So Miguel has been harmed by the decision of the school just to change his course schedule without telling him, because now he's not taking all the necessary courses that he's required to take, looking ahead at what he's wanting to do in his future educational endeavors. And then also the relationship between the counselor and Miguel's parents has probably taken a strain from this, because he was told that he would be welcome back to school and there were no changes brought up about his schedule. And then on the first day back, Miguel was actually told, not his parents, like, oh, by the way, your schedule has changed. So there's probably a loss of trust there between his parents and the counselor. As far as contravening existing law, for free and appropriate public education, it is required to be provided to all students. So if his education that is being provided is no longer appropriate, then the law has been broken. And then as far as the Individuals with Disabilities Act, it does protect students with orthopedic impairments, which Miguel now does have an orthopedic impairment due to his injury that he sustained during the football game. There was no breach of contract, I believe, as far as any of the staff members. This action could be construed as discriminatory against Miguel or students that have disabilities, but I do not believe that the actions were or could be considered harassment towards Miguel. Section 3 is to synthesize exactly what has happened. So far, Miguel, a student athlete, has sustained an injury that has left him paralyzed from the waist down. Due to the injury, Miguel's class schedule has been changed because his old biology classroom cannot accommodate his new means of transportation, which is a wheelchair. Section 4, again, is just to synthesize the facts. So far, people who are involved, Miguel, who is the student, his parents, the high school counselor, Ms. Gussman, myself being the building principal in this case, Dr. Harvey, the superintendent, and then Howard Carey is the attorney that has been present up until now. Again, this happened in the Dover Unified School District at Nottingham High School, and the injury that he sustained happened at a high school football stadium. The program, so Nottingham High School is a public high school. The grade level that is currently being served is 9th through 12th grade, and Miguel is a sophomore, so he's a 10th grader. The subject for concern for Miguel and his parents is biology or his science course. So he was placed in another science course that was not a college preparatory class, but it would satisfy his requirement just for graduation from Nottingham High School. And then the special education program staff will more than likely need to be getting involved just to ensure that Miguel's needs are being met in an appropriate way. Section 5 is to review and prioritize the information. So since the community is such a small knit, very close community, and parents talk with one another, I do think that community members might be disappointed or upset by the changes that were made without Miguel's knowledge and without his parents' consent. So I do think that that could cause conflict to stakeholders throughout the community. Individuals and groups that have a stake in the outcome. One person would definitely be Dr. Harvey, the superintendent, and mentioned how he had worked very hard to develop great relationships with teachers and administrators and a lot of families throughout the school district. I myself would have an important stake in the outcome depending on the decisions that were made and the choices that were taken. Again, parents would talk with one another, and the choices could either make people happy and how the school had chose to handle it, or it can make them upset depending on how the situation would play out. Another person that I think would have an outcome in this situation would be the high school counselor, because her lack of communication with parents and with Miguel is kind of what started this whole thing, because they were unaware of the changes that were happening. And that probably would have been up to her to share that with him at that original meeting that they had when he was planning on coming back to school. I do think that everyone has been consulted that needs to. The only person that may not know all the details of the situation would be Dr. Harvey. But because the community is so small and close-knit, I'm sure that he already knows of the injury of the student from the football game. There are a few questions that I would have to want to know more about the situation. For example, are there any classrooms that are open, not being used, that are wheelchair accessible that could be used? Are there any third period times that teachers have a plan that do have a wheelchair accessible classroom if they just needed a classroom for one period? How many classrooms in the school are not wheelchair accessible, because that could become a bit of a concern. Are there any science classrooms that are wheelchair accessible, because maybe it's all the science classrooms aren't wheelchair accessible? I don't know that detail. And then maybe is there another teacher that teaches biology during that third period time that does have a wheelchair accessible classroom? So even though there are some questions and more details that I would want to know about this scenario, I do feel like I have enough information to make an informed decision to do what is best for Miguel, because that's the whole point of kind of being in this role. So moving into section 6, which would be to identify options and possible consequences of the options that you could take. So option 1 would be to really take no action and just let parents to move forward however they choose with the attorney that they've chosen to bring in. Option 2 would be to re-enroll Miguel in his biology class immediately, and then possibly moving teachers around if there was a science classroom that was wheelchair accessible, moving his teacher into one of those wheelchair accessible classrooms and basically flipping teachers from one class to another in the middle of the school year. And then option 3 would be to find a teacher that does teach biology in a wheelchair accessible classroom and place Miguel in that class, depending on when the classes are offered, depending on what period they are offered. So best case scenario, it would be during the third period and he could just join right in. Not necessarily worst case, but the opposite of that would be they don't offer it during third period, but another time, and then making adjustments to his schedule as necessary. Section 7 will be to evaluate some of my options. So for option 1, which would be to take no action, really I couldn't find a single pro of this option because parents are so upset Miguel's not getting what he needs. Really, they're not meeting his needs, I don't personally think. So I couldn't find any pros for that one. Cons would be that he is still not taking the college course. His parents are still going to be upset. And legally, again, the school isn't serving Miguel as they should be. And then to re-enroll him in the biology class and then kind of flip teachers. The pros of this is that Miguel does get the preparatory requirement that he needs. His parents would be pleased that his schedule hasn't changed, and legally they are serving him as best they can. One big con to this, especially in my role as a classroom teacher now, would be moving classrooms in the middle of the year. I would imagine that would be very stressful and straining on your job on top of everything else that you're already taking care of. And then for option 3, to find a wheelchair accessible classroom with a teacher that does teach biology. Here he is taking the college prep class. Legally, his needs are being met and his parents' concerns are being addressed, and they would feel like they were being heard by the school. Some cons is maybe some of his overall schedule may be changing, and he might have to learn and work with a different teacher. So section 8 would be to choose the best option. So for me, I think the best option would be number 3. So identifying a teacher that does teach biology and does teach in a wheelchair accessible classroom and placing Miguel in that setting would be the best. I think that this is really the best decision because it's addressing the concerns of Miguel's parents. It's allowing his educational needs to be met in an appropriate way, and it's not too drastic, like changing classrooms or changing things for multiple teachers and multiple other people in the building. So, section 9, the last section is to imagine implementing my decision. So, exactly what I would do is attend the meeting with Miguel's parents, discuss the plan of action, explain to them what's going to happen, reviewing the master schedule, finding a teacher that does teach biology and does teach in a wheelchair accessible classroom, and determine the periods where biology is taught, and then make adjustments to the rest of the schedule accordingly if that was needed to ensure that all of his classes are the same. They might be in a different order, but he's still taking all the same classes. So considering some of the outcomes, I think that his parents will be pleased that he's in biology and he's receiving that college preparatory class, which seemed to be one of their biggest concerns was getting that class as a college prep class. And then I think that Miguel will be pleased because he's going to continue taking the same courses. And obviously, him and his family are already thinking ahead, thinking forward about classes that he needs for college. People that I think need to be involved and know what's going on are the classroom teachers. If they're making changes to their rosters, they would need to know that. Miguel obviously is the student, and then Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez, his parents, would need to be informed and know what's going on with their son's education. I do think that I would be able to handle the situation on my own without support from my superiors as the building administrator. I would just be sure to confirm that both Miguel and his parents are happy with the plan of action and they're comfortable with the steps that we've come up with to move forward. Again, I would just remind Miguel's parents, be apologetic for them not knowing because they have a right to know about their son's education, and then letting them know that I really want to do what's best for him to continue his education after going through such a life-changing injury, such as his paralysis. If the chosen plan doesn't work, I would just sit down with Miguel's parents and say, what would you like me to do? Because I feel like I have a good understanding of their concerns and what they're wanting to see change. But if I don't, sitting down with them to really understand and hear what their concerns are and how I can best address their concerns. So this has been my presentation for the EDL 853 case